Hello everybody in Melbourne. Thank you so much for finding the time to read my book and to talk about it. I wish I was there with you now. Greetings from rainy, drizzly, mid-Old Wales. Old Mid-Wales, not New South Wales, Old Mid-Wales. 20 from my study at home. The walls are not lined with climate change books, they're actually lined with comics, and the way I've managed to keep sane and keep my personal activism going for years is by having passions and interests other than the environment. I guess just to say a few things about the issues I raise in the book that have come to the fore for me. I was in Paris for the climate negotiations and was really staggered to see that still, after so many years, there is a complete separation of wellhead and tailpipe, what I talk about in the book. The position, a declaration which came out of Paris, contained not one word about how we're going to stop producing it. We somehow think we can phase something out, they are talking about that, and reduce our emissions without in any way considering how we are going to stop producing the stuff that makes them, which, as I point out in the book, is, I think, a misconstruction. I think is a major cognitive error, and that still continues. Another thing which I talk about in the book, which is, I think, still very pertinent. I mean, they all are, but I think for me, the more I talk about it, the more certain things become clearer. This socially constructed silence is absolutely key. We had an election in Britain, since I wrote the book, a national election in which climate change did not figure anywhere as an issue for the candidates or in the media. And part of the reason for that was I looked through the focus group work that was done by all of the parties on the election, or the surveys too. Climate change was never mentioned as an issue that was of concern or appropriate for people. Because it does not exist in the wider social discourse, people don't talk about it. It doesn't appear when they're asked what they should talk about or what other people should talk about. And the end result is it was a complete non-issue. We have a Prime Minister in Britain, David Cameron, who certainly gets climate change, and before he came into power talked about it a lot. He's been very well briefed on it, who has still not made a single policy position on it, and the agenda is slipping as a result. So I think confronting that silence is key, and from a campaign point of view, in terms of both our personal engagement with the issue, but I also think in terms of campaign-wise, I think we have to challenge that. We enormously overestimate how much it's talked about. It really isn't. Even here in Britain, we've just had the mildest winter ever recorded. Again, we've had extreme flooding, some of the highest rainfalls ever recorded. Still, it is not being talked about enough, and every opportunity we can take on that. Another point I talk about in the book is how climate change has a socially constructed narrative that people project their own issues onto. We're seeing this actually in an interesting way with the Zika virus, where different people are projecting their own worldviews onto it. Some people are saying it's climate change. Some people are saying that it's genetically modified mosquitoes. Some people are saying that it's not mosquitoes at all, but it's pesticides. Some people are saying that it's a key issue for development. It's being held upon as preventing the movement of people. All of the issues you might wish to project onto it are there. So climate change is another one of these, and the most pertinent way that people project onto it is from political worldview, where, as I say in the book, it sits in this, well, it doesn't even sit between political views. It becomes something around which people define their identity as a kind of shibboleth. Your position on climate change, for in particular, whether you're left-wing or whether you're right-wing. We're seeing a set of primary elections in America where it is utterly polarized between left and right as to their position on climate change. The majority of Republican candidates refuse to accept that climate change even exists at all, and certainly none of them represent the science properly on it. So since writing the book, I have continued to explore this division, noticing how it takes these narratives. My book came out at the same time as a very good book by Naomi Klein, in which Naomi has done a great job in terms of shaping climate change into a left-wing narrative, a left-wing activist radical narrative. That has to happen across the board, and the one area where I might disagree with Naomi is I think we can't just do this from the left. It has to be something where the left and the right, and people of all kinds of different worldviews of class, of politics, have their own narrative, so a collective narrative, but they have their own identity around it. And as you can see, if you please do go to my website for climate outreach, the organisation I founded and work for, we've continued to do this with a report which came out just this week on how climate change can be understood from people of different faiths. I talk in the book about faith, and I've continued to work with that. So how, for the world's 5 main faiths, how can they each differently think about climate change in a slightly different way? And I've done a great deal of work with conservatives, building on what I did in the book of the spending time with radical Tea Party folks in the US, continuing to do that to some extent here in Europe as well. Spending time sitting and listening, respectfully listening to the views of conservatives, recognizing what it is which is important for their worldview, what makes that different for people of a left-wing or environmentalist worldview, and trying to say how have we got into this horrible, painful situation where we have become so divided around an issue that actually, of all of these things, should bring us together. And I guess building on the book, what I've tried to do is the next stage is to practically develop the solutions for this. What do those solutions look like, and what is the language we need to use? The argument which, since writing it, I have increasingly been applying in my conversations with politicians in the environmental movement is that politics, on climate change politics, is a diversity issue. That we need a climate movement which is much more diverse, politically diverse, as well as diverse in terms of, you know, ethnicity or gender or the issues that we would normally talk about diversity. And I've been urging all of the mainstream environment groups to consider hiring conservative staff, hiring people who can represent a different worldview so that they can start to understand and appreciate it. It's an ongoing project. I've got some struggles on that, but please do look at my website, and please do mention and share the book. Thank you so much. Have a lovely discussion. Bye.